What is happening, everybody? Welcome into another episode of the Mile High on Broad podcast. We got a great show in store for you today. First off, excuse the headset. We had some technical difficulties on set, so this is so you guys can hear me today. But yeah, Mike, how are you doing?
You know what? It's funny. You're having the technical difficulties. I'm having the vocal difficulties. So if I sound a little under the weather, it's because I'm getting over some allergies right now. We have some pollen that's coming out here. But other than that, I am super excited for the conversation that we're going over today. We're talking over some of my favorite positions. I think one of them is probably my favorite position in the NFL, and then one of the positions that I think is probably the most underrated. So very excited for today's episode.
That's weird because I didn't have kickers down on my list of stuff we were talking about today.
For what? What do you think of my favorite? Or
Oh
just
yeah, yeah. You love kickers, right?
I mean, I don't mind kickers. I would happily run through kickers, but I know you're definitely not a big kicker guy. You've taken them out of our fantasy league,
Sure
so
have, sure have. Kickers have no place in fantasy at all. So, now, but today what we're going to be talking about is wide receivers and tight ends. Kind of keep with the trend we've had the last couple of weeks, where we've been talking over our top 10 quarterbacks, top 10 running backs. We're going to get into that out a little bit. We're just going to do our top five wide receivers, our top five tight ends, and then we'll have some discussion on some guys we thought we're on the cusp to getting in but didn't get in there. Our lists are very similar, but I think there's definitely some guys that arguments could be made, should be in there, could be in there. So make sure you guys let us know what you guys think after it's all said and done. Let's kick it off. Let's start with the wide receivers. Mike, who you have number one?
yeah. So for me, number one wide receiver coming into next year, it's Justin Jefferson. I think that this last year he was clearly the statistically most dominant through all 17 games. And that's also just a reflection on his career so far as an entirety in the NFL since he's stepped into the league. I think after about the first 4 weeks of the NFL, he's been a top five wide receiver, top 10 wide receiver for sure since he's stepped into the league. And I think he's also doing this with a mediocre quarterback. I don't think Kirk Cousins is anything special. And so, his talent is just insane. He had that sick one-handed catch we saw earlier this year.
It was
And so,
nuts.
yeah, it was absolutely crazy. And so for me, Justin Jefferson is clearly the number one wide receiver coming into the league. Number two, I have Cooper Kupp. For me, he took a minor setback, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So first off, he was outstanding the games that he did play last year, but he didn't play all of them. So I'm going to ding him a little bit for that. There's also some question marks as to who his quarterbacks are going to be next year. Is it going to be Cooper Kupp? I'm sorry, is it going to be Cooper Kupp? Is it going to be Baker Mayfield? Is it going to be Matt Stafford again? We don't really know. There's some kind of reports out there that Stafford's kind of iffy on what they're doing with him next year. We'd seen what Cooper Kupp was like before Stafford got there, but him and Stafford certainly have a wavelength together. So just some uncertainties there is why I've kind of knocked him from the number one spot. Last year, he was clearly the best in the league. I think he had arguably the single greatest wide receiver season ever, winning the Triple Crown in receptions, receiving yards, touchdowns, and then the postseason that he had, going on to win the Super Bowl, winning Super Bowl MVP. So I'm not going to just discount any of that. So for me, he still remains number two on my list. From there, we get into Tyreek Hill. I think this was a guy that a lot of people in the media thought was going to have a down season. A lot of people thought that he was going to get exposed. Yeah, okay. A lot of people thought he was going to get exposed without Patty Mahomes, and turned out that neither one of them really need one another. Tyreek Hill ended up having a career year. He had 1,700 yards this year. He had 7 touchdowns. He had 120 catches almost. So career highs in catches and yards. Guy's just an outstanding player on top of being, I think, the single most dangerous wide receiver we've ever seen in the NFL. That speed that he has, I mean, it's unmatched with any wide receiver I think we've ever seen. So yeah, I got the Cheetah at number three. At number four, I've got Ja'Marr Chase. Again, I'm going to ding him a little bit because he got injured this year. He ended up missing 5 games, but with the games that he did play, he actually had more catches than he did all of last year, which is impressive. He still had over 1,000 yards. He had 9 touchdowns. So, I think I would imagine that next year he's going to be a little bit more healthy. Him and Joe Burrow clearly love each other in the sense that they are just, connected on and off the field. Those LSU boys clearly have something going because Jefferson and Ja'Marr Chase and Joe Burrow are all top 5 at their position. So clearly that LSU team was stacked. So That's a side tangent, but yeah, I think that Jamar Chase, since he's jumped into the league, he's been a top 5 wide receiver. So yeah, I got Jamar Chase at number 4. And then at number 5, I actually have Devontae Adams. The reason why I have him at number 5, despite probably being arguably the single best wide receiver over the last, I don't know, 5 years or so, is his age. He's a little bit older. He's 30. There's that's typically when you'll start to see some regression. We also have some question marks as to, well, not some, a lot of question marks as to who's his quarterback going to be next year. Derek Carr is out. He no longer has Aaron Rodgers at the moment. Even though he's been trying to make some cases to get Aaron Rodgers again, but we don't know who his quarterback's going to be. But despite all that, last year he still had 100 catches. He still had 1,500 yards. Still had 14 touchdowns. So still just statistically very dominant. And so I would imagine that even with the question marks at wide receiver and being a little bit older, he's still going to be very, very good next year.
It's a good list. Again, top 5, right? So I think we're nitpicking some of these guys.
Very tough.
My list is very similar. I mean, my top 3, I got the same guys as you, a little different order.
Okay.
Number 1 for me is Cooper Kupp. That's my boy. Until I see something else, he's still going to be number 1 to me. I mean, this dude is elite in every category. He understands and sees the field the way a quarterback does. He blocks as good as a lot of tight ends are going to block and is willing to block, where you're not going to see a lot of wide receivers do that. He's an elite route runner, separator. I mean, the guy's just elite in every way. He was elite when he was on the field last year, and he wasn't a major injury. It was a high ankle sprain. So it's not like this guy's not out. They kept him out because the season was lost, and there's no reason for them to put Cooper Kupp in jeopardy for a lost season. So the Rams were smart and just said, hey, we're just going to pull him and sit him. But it was a high ankle sprain. It's not like this is something that, an ACL or something like that we're talking about. Obviously, Matt Stafford being there is the thing that's going to ensure that he has another, triple crown type season. But I even think even without it, he's a good enough wide receiver. I mean, he was good with Jared Goff's inconsistencies. He was, up and down as a wide receiver. I think at this point he's broke out to the point where, even if he has somebody else coming in, I think Stafford plays, so even if he gets 15 games of Matthew Stafford, he's still going to have a humongous season. For me, it's Justin Jefferson's too. I think you're nitpicking of some of this stuff. I mean, Justin Jefferson is clearly the best young wide receiver in the league. Whenever Kupp decides he wants to leave or start slipping, I think it's easily Jefferson's, crown. If it's not going to be this season, I mean, I think we're picking at hairs between those two guys. I mean, he's elite and a stud. The fact that, that wide receiver class is so highly touted, you got a guy who's in prison, you got a guy who wants to play diva. CeeDee Lamb, I think, is a very solid wide receiver. He's clearly not Justin Jefferson. And then you had, who was the guy that got drafted right before him? What was his name again? I'm pretty sure they're on the same team now, and he's a punt returner. Yeah.
Jalen Reagor, I think. Maybe
that's what it was.
That's what it was. Very familiar name. Funny enough, he's actually with the Vikings right now. So, hey, maybe he's a wide receiver 2 to Justin Jefferson. I don't know. Hard to say.
As a backup punt returner. Great job for the number 25 overall pick. So, and for me, 3, it's Tyreek Hill, like you said. I mean, look, I thought the guy was going to regress. I thought he was super fast, but I thought that, the way that Patrick Mahomes was able to create plays out of nothing by scrambling around is what allowed him to make some of the plays that he did, because he's so fast. You can only cover that dude for so long. And if Mahomes can extend a play 2 or 3 seconds, he's going to always be open. So, but I mean, again, 1,700-yard season, maybe the best one he's ever had. And he's playing with a Tua's and Teddy Bridgewater's and Skylar Thompson, I think was who it was.
It was.
Forgettable, right? I mean, that's who's throwing him the ball. And the guy's still having a dominant season. So for me, this is a guy I had major question marks coming into last year, and I cemented in at the number 3 spot going into this year. He's proven that he is in that company of elite wide receivers. 4 for me is Adams. Look, I can't take Devontae down the list. I mean, this guy was arguably number 1 for, years.
5 years,
He still, over the last 5 years, leads the league in receiving touchdowns by a massive margin. Yeah. So if you want to say, like, hey, maybe he doesn't put up 1,500 yards like he has every year, like, he's still going to put up double-digit touchdowns in his sleep. For me, the questions about quarterback are there, but, Stidham was meh, but look, Adams last year was number one in target share at 32.6% of the target share for
Crazy
his
number.
team. All right, not just wide
Crazy
receivers, for
number.
his entire team. I mean, it's an insane number. So most wide receivers are getting 24% target share. This guy's getting such an insane amount. I don't care who the quarterback is. Devonta Adams is a good enough quarterback. If he's getting 30+% of the target share, like he's going to put up numbers and he's always going to be a threat in the red zone, even at 30 years old, which isn't old. If he was 32, 33, I'd be like, yeah, maybe. But like until I see him start to regress and I say, hey, his upside is down and his target share is starting to drop, there's nobody there that threatens that 30% target share. He's too good and they're paying him too much money to not be that guy. And for me, number five, this might be a surprise for some people, but I think his talent was really just unleashed last year, which is why I'm excited to put him on there. Is AJ Brown,
Okay, I
an
like it.
Eagle?
Yeah.
Look, he had 15.6 yards per target last year, or per reception last year, which is actually number one in the league. The dude was an elite wide receiver. The problem was it was super inconsistent. He played in Tennessee where all they did was run the ball with Derrick Henry. Tannehill was clearly not an elite quarterback. You put him somewhere with Jalen Hurts where he can really flash his talents, and I mean the guy blew up. 1,496 yards was fourth in the entire league last year, 11 touchdowns, tied for third. I mean, he showed that he is the elite wide receiver that people thought he was coming out of college. He was that good. He just didn't really get to utilize those talents in Tennessee. Now in Philadelphia, they're on, full show. And for me, AJ Brown is just that guy whose elite talents, we saw flashes of before, and now they're fully in the pan. And to me, AJ Brown has moved up into that number five spot. So
It's funny
again,
that you actually.
another guy had
Yeah.
huge question marks coming into the year. I had him way down, wrote him off in fantasy. I was wrong. So
Yeah, and it's actually funny that you think that his talents are on full display. And I know why you're saying that is because he's coming from Tennessee, which is a run first offense,
mhm.
right? I mean, Philly was a bottom 10 throwing team last year in terms of throws per game. So I would actually even argue that maybe his talents aren't still being fully recognized. And so I definitely think that's something to certainly consider. But I don't know, what do you think to that? Do you think that if he was in a system like the Vikings, a system like the Rams, where they're constantly throwing the ball, do you think that maybe he's somebody that could even jump up higher on your list coming into next year? If the Eagles transition to more of a passing offense, considering we're losing our Pro Bowl 1,200-yard rusher this year.
Maybe. I mean, I think that he in a pass happy offense, could he put up better stats? Yeah, I think he does. I think he's got the talent for that. As far as moving up my list, I'd need to see regression from one of the older guys, Cup, Hill, Adams, before I'd move him up from those guys, just because those guys I think are just in a level above. Like I said,
Okay.
top three we didn't have a disagreement on. Adams to me, just until I see him slowing down or stop getting a 30+% target share, which let's be honest, AJ Brown is contending with Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith, who in their own rights are, phenomenal weapons. So
Yeah.
even if they go to a super pass happy offense, he's not going to demand that kind of target share. So until I see one of those guys step, I don't think I'd put him up. Absolutely, he puts up crazy stats if he's in a pass happy offense because that's the talent level this guy has. It's funny him coming out. Him and DK were teammates, and there was always
Yeah.
this back and forth. DK gets all this, clout because of his physique.
Yeah.
But look, at the end of the day, if you were to tell me pick one of these two guys to build around, like it's not even a question for me. AJ Brown is clearly a far better wide receiver than DK Metcalf is, and I don't think it's close. So,
Hmm.
AJ Brown he's a better wide receiver. Maybe he's not as big or fast or strong, but in his own right, I mean, he's still an elite, human being, but he's just a better wide receiver, if that makes sense. So,
Yeah.
all right, let's jump into some tight ends. I'll run through mine first. They're tight ends. It's a pretty shallow group. I think for me, when I looked at it, there may be five. I don't think there's a ton of arguments made for people who can be in the five after the five, and definitely once you get past, 8, 9, it gets really slim pickings. Where we could probably drop 20 wide receiver names and make arguments for them to be in the top 10 tight end.
Sure.
I think after maybe 8, there's any discussion on anybody's names after that. So,
Yeah.
but for me, at number one, there's no question it's Travis Kelce. This guy is third among all players in the last 5 years in total receiving yards. That's everybody who catches a football, third. Okay, not a wide receiver. Since 25 Since 2015, he's actually number one in the entire league in total receiving
Hmm.
as a
I
tight
didn't know
end.
that. Yeah, I didn't know.
He's had 7 straight 1,000-yard receiving seasons. And fun fact, he does have a return touchdown as a tight end. So I
There
thought
you
that was
go.
a fun fact. But look, Travis Kelce's elite. The dude's getting older every year. I think he's going to slow down. He's
I
not. To
know.
me,
I know.
he's he plays with Patrick Mahomes. They clearly have a connection. And to me, I've moved him into that category with Derrick Henry, where he's an outlier. All right, so I can't grade him against any type of age or position or any of that kind of stuff I would normally judge, a group of players by. He's an outlier. He's a freak. So again, until he stops doing something, he's got to be the guy. I mean, after last year, he's shown that he's just. I mean, he's that guy. He's elite. To me, he's arguably one of the top. I don't know, 3 tight ends of all time. I could make an argument that he's a top 2 tight end of all time, but that's maybe a discussion for another time. But I think those reasons alone, he's clearly the number 1 tight end. Number 2 for me is Kittle. I could see some people dropping him down their list. To me, take the injuries out of it. He's the second best, maybe the best tight end. I mean, his stats next to Kelce's per game on a basis are almost identical. In some cases, Kittle's are better. It's been injuries that have held him back. If this guy breaks out of those injury seasons and he just plays a full 17, I mean, this dude, he's next level. He's that good. So I'm going to take the injuries out of it, and I'm going to say, as a talent, this guy's the number 2 tight end in the league. After that, I had some questions on who I put in after those 1 and 2 guys. That was easy for me. I got Andrews third. Obviously, last year the injury season kind of hurt him a little bit, but if I look back one more year, I mean, the dude was a phenomenal receiving tight end. He's clearly the number 1 pass catcher in that offense. And I think anywhere else he has that kind of elite level production as well. He's a great route runner. He's got great hands. So to me, Mark Andrews is the number 3 tight end going into next year. And 4 for me was a guy that was big coming out of the draft, kind of dropped off a little bit. His production wasn't what it bid. And then he goes to Minnesota halfway through last year, and TJ Hawkinson just blows up. So TJ Hawkinson, up and coming tight end. The dude was touted coming out of college as a phenomenal blocker and a phenomenal receiver. And when you look at what he was able to do once he actually got that legit role in an offense that he did in a pass happy offense, and the guy has just turned into the stud he was supposed to be coming out of college. And look, he's 3 years in the league now, 4 years in the league, maybe.
Yep.
And that's about when tight ends really start taking their grasp and taking off. So I think bigger things are coming for TJ Hawkinson, and I'm excited to kind of watch him kind of be that next up and coming stud tight end, and maybe even take over an Andrews or something like that come in the next couple of years. 5, look, man, I got another Eagle at number 5. It's Dallas Goedert. Yeah, I think he's just
not
a great.
Not Grant Katera. It's not.
No, he's just look, man. He's a great all around tight end. He's a good receiver. He's good in the middle of the field. He's a physical guy that can block and get those extra yards, which I think for Philadelphia fans, having a wide receiver who catches the ball and doesn't, fall over his own shoelaces, is great. So
shots at Zach Ertz there.
Shots at Zach Ertz. Yeah, I mean Zach Ertz, and I got to experience in Denver with Noah Fant. They're very much the same freak athletes. Catch a ball, fall over. You don't really understand what's going on. But Dallas Goedert's a guy who fights for extra yards, and he adds that extra level to the offense in Philadelphia. So I threw him on the 5 spot. I think he's just a great, solid all-around tight end, which when I was making my list, those were things I had to take into consideration. It's not just about the receiving stats. It's, can he do all the work that's required of a tight end? And to me, Dallas Goedert's that guy.
Yeah, so before I even get into my top 5, I'm going to not allow you to take shots at my boy Zach Ertz like that, all right? Super Bowl winning Zach Ertz for us, right? He was a monster.
Hey, he's a great tight end. Okay. He's a great tight end. If he fought for yards, he'd be on this list, right? But he's old now. But minus being old, not fighting for yards.
in his prime, he was a top 3 tight end in the league for probably 2 years. So
yeah,
I'm not going to have any of that. But
he's great.
Now, all joking aside, back to on my list for the top tight ends. So we have the top 3 are the same. I mean, like you said, it's kind of a very shallow pool for the top 3. So I don't want to rehash too much of what you went into, but yeah, I agree largely with Your assessment on Kittle there, Kelsey there. He's clearly just been the best tight end consistently for the last 3, 5, 7 years now. So for a while it was him and Gronk, and then Gronk retired, and it's clearly been Kelsey since then. So
Yeah.
don't want to spend too much time on Kelsey there. Number 2, like you said, I got Kittle. For me, Kittle is probably the most well-rounded tight end in the league. I think that if Kittle has been able to stay healthy, I think that I may have him higher than Kelsey, because I think he is as good of a receiving threat to Kelsey. I think he has actually the second most receiving yards all time by a tight end in a single season, behind only Kelsey at 1,400 and change. But what he gives you that Kelsey doesn't is Kittle is an elite blocker for a tight end. He might be the single best tight end blocker in the league. And so I think coupling those two things together, if Kittle can stay healthy, I wouldn't have a problem moving him up to number 1, but the best ability is availability. And so he has been able to stay super healthy. So for me, he has to be number 2. Number 3, Mark Andrews. He's wide receiver 1 on that team at not being a wide receiver. Lamar clearly loves throwing to him. I think some of Lamar's issues, in throwing outside the numbers kind of show a little bit. And so therefore he feels more comfortable throwing it to Mark Andrews inside the numbers. And so that's able to help Andrews out a little bit. I think he's a bit of an underrated probably blocker, but all in all, other than the injuries that were happening last year, I'm expecting a bounce back year. So for me, I got him at number 3. At number 4, I have Dallas Goedert. I know you had him at 5. So again, don't want to spend a whole heck of a lot of time on him. He's just been very productive and very consistent since he came into the league. His first year, he was sharing targets there with Zach Ertz, but since then, he's been good for 600, 500, 800, 700 last year in terms of yardage. He was actually regarded as a blocking tight end when he came out, but he's actually transformed himself into a great receiving tight end. And so I think he offers a lot on both ends of the ball. His stats would have even been higher last year. I think last year would have been pushing for closer to 1,000 yards receiving. But he was battling some injuries. So, it is what it is. But all in all, I think Dallas Goedert is a great tight end. And then at number 5, I actually have Darren Waller at number 5. I think his talent is undeniable. I think the guy is he's a freak. He was actually drafted as a wide receiver coming out of the draft in 2015 by Baltimore. He had some PED issues or drug issues and things like that, but he really was able to find himself in Oakland in 2019 as just a stud of a player. He had like 1,100 yards and 3 or 4 touchdowns that year, really put himself on the map. Followed that up with another almost 1,200 yard season, like 8 or 9, 10 touchdowns, something like that. And then since then, he's been kind of plagued a little bit by injuries. But I don't foresee this guy being a very injury prone guy. I think that with him and Devontae Adams, I think that the two of them are going to make for some big issues for a lot of teams next year in terms of the passing game, as long as they can get their quarterback situation right. Plus they're also losing Josh Jacobs. And so, at least I don't know, I think they're probably going to lose Josh Jacobs. If they lose him, it means that they're probably going to have to throw the ball a lot more. And so that's going to give Darren Waller a lot more opportunities to really show up what I think he can do.
Yeah, so my biggest downsides with Waller, I agree as a talent, they're there, but I got to push back just this one. We don't have to get a big debate, but the reason I had to drop him were some reasons that you made on some other guys that you named, right?
Sure.
Age, right? We talked, he came to the league in 2015. The guy's on his way up there, right? He's had a couple of good seasons, but he's also had some injury issues, all right? Now you add in the fact that you have questions about Adams' quarterback situation. Well, we know that Adams is going to get target share, so that means that the reduced passing attack that's coming out of whoever that quarterback is now gets turned on to Hunter Renfrow, Darren Waller, these other guys who are going to start dropping down. And so I feel like they're going to talk down. And then you want to talk about a guy. They said that today they're tagging Josh Jacobs. So if he doesn't sign, they're going to tag him, which means Josh Jacobs is probably, maybe they don't, right? But it looks like that's the move that they're going to make, is that they're going to tag Josh Jacobs if he doesn't sign to a long-term deal to be a Raider, which it sounds like he wants to stay there too. So I just think for all those reasons, it's hard for me to put him up there, because I look at a guy who's older. He's had some injury issues. He's elite, but his target share question marks. You got his one super elite year he was there. A lot of wide receivers were hurt, and you didn't have a Devontae Adams there. So as a talent, yes, I think he's great, but I think there's enough question marks there. For me, he's almost in that same category with another guy who's just a super freak of an athlete that, in the right situation used, I think could be conversation. But like a guy like David Njoku is a freak athlete, just like Waller. But the situation tells me that, is he a great my top 8? Sure, but I don't think an Njoku, a Waller, similar type guys to me when I looked at this list is I just don't think that they're on that next level with stuff. So
Interesting. Yeah. See, I don't know. I think that I'm gonna be honest. I don't know what kind of free agency Josh Jacobs could command if they were to let him go. But Josh Jacobs, like, yeah, for sure.
he'd get paid.
But I don't know. Like we always see what running backs look like, after they get paid. And I don't know if that's a laziness thing or if it's more likely an age / touches kind of a thing. And Josh Jacobs could be in for a down year. I know I had him, and I think number 3 going into the year. But I said in that video, I mean, he's somebody who I could definitely see having a down year. So we'll see. I think it's definitely gonna be interesting though, for sure.
Hey man, when you get the crap kicked out of you on every time you touch a ball, I mean,
Yep.
you wear out a lot faster. I mean, that's why guys, play other positions so much longer than running backs. Your body just can't take it, So
yeah, no, they sure do. I don't know. I guess one guy that I kind of want to talk about real quick for tight ends that neither of us had on our list, but I think probably a year ago we both probably would have, is Kyle Pitts. He had 1,000 yards receiving as a tight end his first year. He was regarded a lot like in the way that you were talking about Hockenson coming out of the draft as a almost can't miss, basically a wide receiver at tight end kind of a guy. And neither of us have him in our list coming into this year. So any reason that you ended up leaving him off yours?
Yeah, I mean, I think the guy has 1 touchdown in the United States in his career or something like that. I mean, look, for me, here's Kyle Pitts. He's a freak talent. Like,
Yep.
do I think he should be on a top 3 list? Yeah, I do. But the dude has just never been able to put it together. I think Atlanta's roster is an absolute joke. And
Sure.
I can't trust Kyle Pitts until I see Kyle Pitts be Kyle Pitts. So I'm done being fooled by the talent. Like there's only so many times you can go, look, I'm super talented. And I go, yes, I'm buying in, before I go, all right, like I'm selling all my stock. I'm not the guy who's going to keep, signing up for that same shit show. So until he shows me that he is the guy everybody keeps telling me he is, he's not that guy, So that's where I'm at. I'm out on Kyle Pitts until Kyle Pitts proves that he is, Kyle Pitts. So
Yeah, I think I'm out until, I don't know. I think maybe he just might be TJ Hockenson 2.0. Like, I think he just might be due for a scenery change, honestly. I think that he was drafted 3rd when he was taken. So clearly Atlanta was not good when they drafted him. And they've only, I think, in my opinion, the roster's only gotten worse, at least especially in regards to things that affect him. They've lost their franchise quarterback for forever in Matt Ryan, so he's not there. They lost 2 of their best wide receivers in Julio Jones, who now is no longer the Julio that we know, but they lost Julio Jones and they lost Calvin Ridley. And then and now that I'm even saying it out loud, they also ended up losing who was the kid that went to the Bucks?
Russell Gage.
Russell Gage. I mean, Russell Gage was at least a viable number 3.
He's solid.
Okay, at number
solid
2.
Guy.
Yeah, he's now gone too. So it's like, all they have is Drake London now and Kyle Pitts, and that's pretty much the offense. They don't have a quarterback. They don't really have a great O-line. So that hurts him, in getting any of his targets. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't know. I think that if he were to get a trade, maybe he can move up in the list. But, at the time being, it's just the talent's there, but I don't know if the production's going to be there.
I got to see it to believe it at this point. So when we came to our wide receiver list, look, I know you probably had Brown somewhere in your consideration. I had Chase somewhere in my consideration, so I don't want to debate those two too much. You want to pick one over the other, like that's fine.
Yep.
A guy I did want to have some discussions on, who I think was on my list last year, D-Hop. All right, I still think he's an elite talent, but I noticed neither one of us had him on our top 5. Where are you at with DeAndre Hopkins going into? I think this is his age 30 season.
Yeah, I think part of the reasons why his stats weren't there is obviously because the suspension. But I mean, he clearly proved that even off the juice, the guy is still incredible. I think he was top 3, top 5 in terms of yards per game, receptions per game, those kinds of things. So clearly, statistically, he has not fallen off yet. Where my issues are coming in on are a little bit of the age, and where is he playing next year, and or who's his quarterback going to be next year? Because it sounds like they may want to move off of him, and so while I think that he is essentially a plug and play player in the sense that he'll probably be a top 10 wide receiver no matter where he goes, question marks about him being a top 5 wide receiver are certainly, I think, available. And so I don't know where he's going to be. He's a little bit older. We'll see what he does. But kind of like what we were talking about with Devontae Adams. I mean, until the guy drops off the face of the earth, I'm not willing to drop him out of my top 10. For me, there's just a few too many questions for me to leave him in the top 5. And also kind of similar to what we were talking about with running back the other week is, I mean, there's just so many good ones out there, man. There's so many good ones. And it's really, really hard to make these lists when you sit down and look at everybody, because there's probably 10, 12, 15 guys that you could go, yeah, these guys have, options at being at the top 5. And so he's just one of those guys that it's tough.
He's a fringe guy for sure. Look, I still think he has elite talent. He looked good, but yeah, you're right. I mean, look, going into his age 30 season, I think he slows down a little bit. I think wherever he goes, he's the true one. It'll be interesting to see if, how much he slows down where he ends up. How about this guy, Stefon Diggs? I didn't even have him in my
Diggs, yeah.
see. I was just so I didn't even really have on my list when I was making my consideration list. He wasn't even really like a guy I threw on there to like, yeah, this guy's going to be in my top 5. I mean, like I wrote Cup Jefferson, and then I wrote a bunch of names, and he was kind of like an afterthought. I kind of scratched him out early. And then I was looking at stats over the last few years, and I mean, his numbers over the last couple of years are like ridiculous, And I'm like, dang, touchdowns, receptions per. I mean, I was like, dang, this dude's been elite, he's been a freak the last few years. And I was like, how is it I can't consider him? But even after looking at his numbers, even that didn't convince me to put him over somebody like AJ Brown, who his numbers are clearly better than, right? Some of these guys like Adams, who he's way younger than, right? I mean, he plays in a huge pass offense that passes 70% of the time in the Bills, and yet still, I have no desire to put him up my list. I don't know, maybe it's an attitude thing. Like he clearly was throwing some temper tantrums. I don't know what it is with him. Like maybe he's that guy who's good, but just flies under the radar enough that you just like, he's not flashy. And I don't know. I have no desire to put him in my top 5, and I can't figure out why, because his numbers say he should be there.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it part of it is definitely his attitude. I don't know if you remember that he had some attitude issues with the Vikings too. And it was weird because it was the year that Adam Thielen went off. Like Adam Thielen started off that year, I think it was either 8 straight or 9 straight 100-yard games. And Adam Thielen was clearly the one at the moment, but Diggs was just throwing a fit. And it's like, dude, you're still getting your targets. You're still getting your numbers. I think he still had over 1,000 yards that year. But I mean, the guy was just throwing such a fit for somebody that had like 1,000-yard season. Now, as soon as he got traded, he then was probably the best receiver of the year that he got traded. I think he had like 1,500 yards, and he was an All-Pro that year. But he's now having attitude issues again. And I mean, I don't know. AJ Brown had some minor, I think, that were probably a little bit overblown by some of the media with the attitude diva things that were going on during that playoff game. But I think some of that was kind of being overblown, but Stefon Diggs seems to have some genuine diva in him where I don't really like it. And it's crazy because he's probably top 3, top 5 route runner in the league. He's fast enough to be a deep threat. He's shifty enough to get open in any of those intermediate routes. He's a very, very good player. He's just, he's a diva. And I don't know, maybe that's why I'm knocking him down off my list too, but I don't really have any desire to move him over Jefferson, Kupp, Hill. I don't really want him over Chase because Chase is younger. I think Chase is better. Adams has been, I think, the best receiver over the last 5 or 7 years. AJ Brown, I think, is more talented. So yeah, like you said, I don't have any desire to move him up either.
I don't either. And I got one more guy that I pushed to put on this list. I want to see if you can guess who it is. I'll give you a couple of hints. So this dude is an elite producer on the field. All right. Has one of the most impressive streaks going into this
Michael
season.
Thomas. Oh, wait, no.
And the only reason that I didn't have him in my 5 spot was massive question marks with the team that he's on. Not only the question marks with quarterback, but also question marks with the coaching staff and just, where this whole team as a whole is going to be next year because I think they're on a downswing. But the wide receiver himself, I think, is elite. I'll give you a couple guesses. If you can't give it, I'll give you another hint.
I don't know. That's really throwing me there. So, I mean, it's clearly not the Cooper Kupps because he's already on the list and whatever. Not Odell Beckham because why would it be Odell Beckham? I'm trying to think. I have no idea who in the world this could possibly be. You don't like DK Metcalf, so it's clearly not DK. Not Tyler Lockett either. I don't know. Who is it?
All right. Plays
All right,
in the
yeah, go ahead. Tell me the conference.
plays in the NFC.
NFC. Okay, so
He also plays with another top 20 wide receiver.
hmm. And it's not DK? Is it DK?
It's not DK.
Okay, I wouldn't think because I know you don't like DK. I like DK a lot more than you do. I think he has a case
That's
for
very true. I do not like DK.
yeah, I think he has a case for a top 10. I wouldn't put him there, but I think he's probably somewhere in that 12th, 15th best wide receiver.
Yeah, can't do it.
Yeah, fine. Is it Dallas? It's not Michael Gatt. No.
It's not Dallas.
Not-
CD Lamb, I didn't
not-
put on my list. I think he's really growing, especially in his one role. He almost put up $1,500 this year. So Lamb might swing into the bottom of my top 10, but no, it's not Dallas. Because I don't think that
is it Mike Evans?
it is Mike
It
Evans.
is Mike Evans. That makes sense because Chris Godwin's also really, really good. Yeah,
1,000 yards
yeah.
every single season
He's ever played.
he's I mean that has to count for something,
Yeah,
um
good point.
and he's a great red zone threat. I mean, he's a big bodied dude, plays great on the outside, and it's I don't this team without Tom Brady, I have no idea who their quarterback's going to be, and honestly
You don't like to run the ball.
I got major questions about their coaching situation. And,
it's not
to me,
good.
without they should have promoted Brian Leftwich, and the fact that they promoted, instead, it just to me, the team just looked the team looked disorganized and in shambles last year. And when you take a team that was as organized in the Super Bowl contenders the year before, and I get injuries about, but there's no reason that team should have looked that bad the following year when the major difference is no more Bruce Arians running that team. I mean, Tom Brady's still there, right? So clearly you still got somebody yelling at people to do their shit. And this team was, I mean, it was just, I mean, for lack of a better word, I mean, it was a shit show down there. And to me, that's coaching. So now I don't know what's going on with the coaching staff, right? And I don't know what's going on with the quarterback. And I want him to be another 1,000-yard receivers because I don't want to see that end,
Yeah.
But man, I mean, Mike Evans he's really, really good.
Evans is really good.
So yeah, that was my guy. I wrote his name down and I knew I was like, if I put this guy in my top 5, which like I said, those questions I couldn't do it, but I penciled him in and I was like, this is a debate because there's so many people. I feel like he just gets disrespected a lot and people don't want to put him as high as,
No,
I think he should go on lists. So
he does, but yeah, Todd Bowles is not him and Dennis Allen are, in my opinion, probably two of the worst head coaches in the league right now that aren't losing their, threat of losing their job at the moment. But yeah, no, he's great. He's definitely in the top 10 argument for me. I think he's a surefire first ballot Hall of Famer, in my opinion. I don't know if he will actually get there because it's a wide receiver and it's always really, really tough to do. But no, I think he's probably the most underrated wide receiver in definitely his era and maybe in NFL history. So no, I think it's a great shout.
1,000 yards every season. If you don't give somebody credit for that work, and like I don't even feel like I'm in love that dude. I look at him and I go, man, the dude just gets it done.
And he's not a diva. Not a diva.
He just goes out and gets it done. Unless
it's
Marshawn Lattimore, and then he throws swings. But all right, guys. Well, that's our list for today. It's tight ends, wide receivers. I had a great time talking through some of these. I'm glad you didn't give me too much pushback on the Mike Evans thing. That was my one I'd highlight and go. And somebody's going to give me some flack for that. Like I said, I think he's a big underrated guy. So hope you guys had fun. Join us next week. We got some good shows coming up for you guys. And thanks for joining us. Have a good night.